The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you, O Lord.
In the course of his teaching, Jesus said to the crowds, "Beware of the scribes who like to go around in long robes and accept greetings in the marketplaces, seats of honor in the synagogues, and places of honor at banquets. They devour the houses of widows and, as a pretext, recite lengthy prayers. They will receive a very severe condemnation." He sat down opposite the treasury and observed how the crowd put money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. A poor widow also came and put in 2 small coins worth a few cents. Calling his disciples to himself, he said to them, "Amen, I say to you, this poor widow put in more than all the other contributors to the treasury. For they have contributed from their surplus wealth, but she, from her poverty, has contributed all she had, her whole livelihood." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus.
In Wes Anderson's film, The Darjeeling Limited, 3 brothers depart on a journey of spiritual awakening across India on a train. It's a difficult time, and each of them is carrying some crisis within them that they're not sharing with the others. They're all a little depressed and self-absorbed. However, in the final scene of their journey, as they've grown closer together and experienced an awakening of sorts, they are out on some abandoned platform, and the train begins to leave without them. And running after the train, they all drop their luggage so that they can catch it, and they jump on just in time. Literally, they're leaving their baggage behind. It's kind of a heavy-handed metaphor, but it's not Wes Anderson's best movie. However, it is a good image, because each of us has something of ourselves that we're being called to leave behind. For the widow, it was a mite, which was the lightest of all coins in ancient Israel. In the temple courtyard in front of the treasury, there were these large horns. And when you would drop money into it, when you dropped coins in, it would make a clanging sound. And so, time and again, wealthy people, in order to have people pay attention to them, would bring huge bags of coins and drop them in. It would make a clattering sound, and everybody would watch and look. However, the widow, nobody paid attention to. And in one sense, there is no completely perfect gift. There's always sort of something in it of ourselves whenever we give. There was one perfect gift who had nothing in it for himself, and that was Christ. When Christ gave, he gave everything of himself. Even the martyrs experienced and were able to gain the kingdom of heaven when they gave up their life for Christ. But Christ didn't need to gain the beatific vision. He is the beatific vision. And so his gift on the cross was absolutely perfect. But the widow's mite was pretty darn close. And when the widow put her mite in, nobody noticed that almost perfect sacrifice, except for the perfect man, whose sacrifice was in fact perfect, who sat there and took notice, and pointed her out then to each and every one of us. We know that the amount that we give is not the important thing. It's not the measure of our gift, but rather it's the spirit with which one gives. Now, when speaking of money, the amount certainly does matter because we have to give in proportion to as we've been blessed. When I went from being a seminarian to a priest, and I was a seminarian, I made a very small stipend. And when I went to being a priest, I was on a salary. And I started making 6 times what I was making as a seminarian. Still not very much, believe me. But I realized that after months, that I had never changed the way I gave. I was sort of on autopilot. So I was still giving the same amount to charity that I was giving when I was a seminarian over in Rome, as I am now. And the problem is not so much even the amount that I'm giving, but rather the fact that I was just doing it automatically. I was on autopilot. There was not an intentionality to my giving at that point. Rather, I was just sort of doing what I thought I needed to do without examining how that God had blessed me more recently. And I think that's something that we can all fall into, sort of being on autopilot when we give, not really thinking about it. Instead of examining from time to time how much God has blessed us and then giving in proportion to that to charitable goods. But the widow's mite is not just about giving money. Philanthropists can give away entire fortunes and still be held back from being able to forgive their spouse or take time for prayer. So each of us has something that God is asking us to give of ourselves. We each have our own widow's mite. And what might that be? It's a pun. For instance, if there's somebody that we can't forgive, are we so enslaved by being busy that we can't give God some time in prayer each day? Do we find it so hard to pull ourselves away from sports or activities or sleep that we ever find ourselves missing Mass? I do think an area such as this, where there's so much emphasis on position, pay grade, or the sort of the status symbols, that it is important to consider what we give to charity. It took me months to consider what I was giving to charity, but it's something we should do regularly so as to be able to give God that intentionality. To give into it until it hurts. It's not always about money, though sometimes it is. Only we ourselves, with the help of the Lord, can determine that area in our lives where we're holding back, where we're not giving Him 100%, to discover what our widow's mite is. But the measure of giving is before us. Christ is as present today on the altar as He was 2,000 years ago in that temple courtyard. He is gazing into each of our hearts the same way He gazed at the widow at the temple. He knows what we're holding back from Him, and He's waiting for us to turn it over to Him. How much lighter will we feel when we divest ourselves of that which is holding us back? Perhaps light enough to ascend with Him to the kingdom of heaven.